I am back for the third video that focuses on ride comfort. This seems to be a serious issue, especially for people who ride small wheel bicycles. If you are new to the channel, this channel is all about small wheel. It does not have to be bicycle. I have published videos on motorcycles, push scooters, whatever, anything that runs on small wheel, really. So one way to research what I talk about is to click on the link to see my shop, which would take you here. And this video is going to be about 3 steps that you can take, that you have to take, in my opinion, to make your ride as comfortable as physically possible. I have done all of these 3 updates, and I have tested out a bunch of items. I have a separate video on saddle sizing. The biggest reason why people are uncomfortable, even if they get a wider tire or a suspension saddle, whatever, is because the saddle is not properly sized. You're not sitting on your sit bone. When you go with a narrower saddle like this, you're going to be sitting on your loins. Same thing with this one. There's a bit of a comfort feature because there is a cutout for the genitals, especially for man, but this is still a fairly wide saddle. It is when you get some of these that you get into something really much wider, so that your sit bone is sitting on something that is a solid supporting surface. Again, look at my other videos, especially the one about the anatomy of the saddle. There's also this cheap saddle. If you're just getting into the game, this could be a very easy way to try out an ultra-wide saddle and how you feel on it. These saddles only cost $30, $40, maximum $50. They last for 2 or 3 years. It's a good way to kind of test out the comfort of a wide saddle. But this has to be the first step. When you try to make your ride more comfortable, the saddle has to be the first step, and it has to be properly sized. If you choose to go with a leather saddle, I don't recommend that you try to apply any kind of lotion and potion to speed up the braking process. If it's properly sized, even if it's hard in the beginning, you are going to get plenty of support, and you will feel a lot more comfortable than on the narrow saddles, which typically most bicycles come with. You can speed up the braking process a little bit by submerging the leather saddle upside down, typically just this leather upper part, in mildly warm water, not too hot but not cold either. I would say for 20 minutes. And if you do that, you're going to lose some of the ink. The ink is going to start coming out. So if you had a red color saddle, the water is going to turn red. If it's black, it's going to turn dark gray. If you don't do it more than once, it's not going to fade the saddle. So you're still going to be okay. And you can wrap a plastic bag around it so that it doesn't get your trousers wet, and go out and ride not for a long time. Maybe 15-20 minutes, because the leather is going to be real soft after soaking for 15-20 minutes, and it's going to break in very, very quickly. I ideally would say don't do it, but if you really want to break it in like that, who's going to stop you? With these saddles, I guess, rather than to have your loin break in the saddle, you might want to do the submerge method. Again, don't submerge it more than once. Do it only for maximum 20 minutes. Then you wrap it in plastic, go outside, ride for a short while, 15-20 minutes, and then it's going to be all broken in. So the saddle is number 1. What saddle you choose is up to you. This is my favorite if you go with leather. What I actually use is this one, not because I like cheap saddles or because I am cheap, but because my hips are so wide, and because I'm using it with this. So I have the Thoughtbuster, and combining the Thoughtbuster with a saddle that have big springs like these, it is just too much. I think there is a contrast there which I don't like. If you have a springless leather seat and you combine it with a Thoughtbuster or some kind of a modern looking design, that actually does not look bad. I think it's a pretty good looking combination. But you can't really combine something as complex as this with, or this, which is the same saddle. I mean, look at all these springs, and then you're going to put this under it. It would just look silly. By the way, this saddle, it is just as a leather saddle with a spring on it, is going to give you minimum 2 inches of travel on the top and another 2 inches at the bottom. That's an enormous amount of travel. If you compare what you get from the Thudbuster, it's actually less than that. It is only 3.5 inches of travel. And I cannot describe to you how comfortable and cushy this one feels. It feels absolutely amazing. So you can imagine how comfortable you would feel on one of these big leather saddles, especially when they are properly broken in. I'm not crazy about the look of it. Some people like it. I think it's just, partly it's very heavy, and it also looks really archaic. So to me, it's a little too much. My favorite is definitely this one if you are going to go with the Brooks. But even if you don't, even if you go with this one, this is the B67 is also very comfortable. It's less expensive, and it still gives you about 2 inches of travel. Not as sophisticated a spring system as this one, but it's going to do the job. Now, if you look at the suspension seat post you can get, you have several options. You don't have to go with the Thudbuster. If you have a small wheel bike with a long seat post, like the Brompton or the Birdie, I don't think you have a choice, because there is so much space that you have to fill up, and these Thudbusters are really not that long. I'm using the full length of it. I'm about 5'8.5" tall, and I feel most comfortable going a little bit under this line. You're not supposed to go under this. You're not supposed to pull out more than that, but you can cheat a little bit. I would say this is going to be a good setup if you are not taller than 5'10". If you're taller than that, you might need an adapter to extend it, because the seat posts are just so long on the Brompton and the Birdie. If you have something like a full-size bicycle or the Moulton, which is small wheels, but it has a completely different frame, it does not have the long seat post. For those kinds of applications where you actually don't have much space, you want to go with something like this. Not a cheap seat post by any means. I mean, this is really expensive, but it is very compact. So there is some tricky engineering, and you can see that the springs are not vertical. They are more like almost horizontal, depending upon how the suspension, depending upon the angle of the seat post, really. So there's not a lot of space taken in, but you do get plenty of travel, and that's the engineering that you're paying for. Once you have the seat and some kind of a suspension mechanism for the seat post arranged and properly installed, you are going to feel a lot more comfortable than the stock. Then what you can do in addition to that, if you have the kind of frame that the Brompton and the Birdie has, is to upgrade the suspension. That's the one that goes into the rear triangle. Both the Birdie and the Brompton have a similar design, and this is a huge upgrade compared to the cheap plastic rings that you get from those companies. That's how they come. And this one I especially endorse because it's not expensive. It's less than $50. It's way better than the stock piece of plastic, and it's not a spring, so you're not getting a yo-yo effect. If there are many designs out there, if it just looks like a spring, it's gonna be cushy, but it's gonna be like a yo-yo. You're going up and down. Every time you hit a bump, it's gonna shake. It's gonna go up and down, up and down. Some of them have a shock inside the spring that is almost like car technology. That's pretty much what you have inside a car, but it's heavy and expensive to do that. So this to me is an excellent compromise. It does not yo-yo. It's very light, very durable, very simple thing to maintain. There's no need to oil anything. So for $44, you really cannot ask for a better solution. If you have an Alex Moulton bike, the stock suspension is really high quality, so I don't think you need to worry about that, and I would not try to upgrade. Same thing with full-size bicycles. They are typically going to be okay as they are. Finally, if you have done everything, you are sitting on a comfortable seat, you have your frame properly suspended, and the seat post and everything is done, what you can do is to upsize the tire a bit. This is the last thing that you should do. If you have very narrow seats or uncomfortable suspension on the frame itself, there is no point worrying too much about the tire, because it's not going to do that much for the comfort. But if you have done everything, then this is something that could add another 5-10% to the experience, depending on the bike that you have. This one, the Greenspeed Scorcher, is typically the only one currently available for the Brompton that fits the Brompton and pulls the pressure down to as little as 40 psi. Instead of the typical 1.35, you get 1.5 width. So it's a little bit bigger, but especially it's a lot more flaxy than any of the smaller tires that come with the Brompton. If you have a Birdie or a Moulton, then, or a full-size bike even, you can mount a Schwalbe Big Apple, which is one of the best commuting tires out there. It was named the Big Apple after Manhattan because of the roads we have here. And it is a 2-inch wide tire. You can go down to 55 psi, and it is almost something you could call a suspension tire. It has decent grip, but you can see that there are deep grooves, so that the water is not a problem. You can ride it in the rain, but it is really a very smooth ride. It's not an uncomfortable ride at all. I've had this on my Birdie, and I absolutely swear by it. It mounts on the Moulton as well, and it's available in full-size bicycle frames as well. The only bigger thing that you might be able to mount on the Moulton, not on the Birdie probably, but on the Moulton, is the Big Ben, which is a little bit bigger than 2 inches. You get 2.15. So it's not a huge gain, but it is a bit more comfortable. It is a bit more bulky. This is basically a gravel tire, but it does come in 20 inches. So you could mount it on the Moulton, not on the Birdie. And definitely in full size, this is a full size tire. You can definitely use it. It's a phenomenal tire to use. So these are the 3 steps that I would recommend. 4 steps, in fact. Fix the seat width, number 1. Number 2, either you get suspension built into the seat, or if not, then get a separate suspension seat post. Number 3, if you can work on the frame and improve the suspension built into the frame for the rear of the Brompton and the Birdie, I definitely recommend it. For the front, you can't really do anything for the Brompton, and the Birdie has an excellent front suspension system. It does not need any help from you. In other words, this one, you don't need any suspension. You don't need to fix anything. And you see the Moulton, it has the same kind of triangle as the others, but the stock suspension is much more than just a cheap piece of plastic. So you don't need to worry about that. I don't even think anybody sells upgrades for the Moulton suspension. The front suspension also is excellent. You get lots of travel, possibly as much as 3 inches, depending upon the model that you buy. And once you're done with all of that, you can upsize the tire. Not to go crazy, and definitely take measurements. I would say the Brompton is very limited. You can only get the Scorcher, which is at 1.5. But the others, this is actually the Big Apple, and some of the Birdie models come with it. And you might be able to mount even the Big Ben on some of the Moulton, not the racing Moultons, but they do sell mountain bike frame setups for the mountain bike. So these are the 3-4 steps that you can take to achieve absolute comfort, and that's about the best that you can do. There's nothing more that I can recommend. That's it for now. I'll be back next time.